welcome to Transfer Talk. Manuel Ugarte is closing in on his move to Manchester United, with the midfielder flying to the UK today for a medical ahead of a £50 million move. Also this hour, no signings at Liverpool just yet because they bring in winger Federico Chiesa from Juventus. Nottingham Forest are in the market for a forward, and today they make a bid for Brentford's Joao Cancelo. We'll tell you whether that's been accepted or not. Eddie Howe's spoken to the media today. We'll hear his thoughts on Mark Guéhi and Kieran Trippier. And Raheem Sterling has just 3 days to try and find a new club. We'll look at all the deals that could happen. We have some breaking news, and that is that Chelsea goalkeeper Kepa Arrizabalaga is currently undergoing his Bournemouth medical after they've agreed a loan deal with Chelsea. It's a straight loan with no option or obligation, and it will, of course, see Kepa link up with Andoni Iraola 9 years after playing together at Athletic Bilbao. It's also believed Kepa has signed an extended Chelsea deal on reduced terms. Of course, last season, Kepa went on loan to Real Madrid. So that is Chelsea goalkeeper Kepa Arrizabalaga, currently undergoing his Bournemouth medical after they've agreed a loan deal with Chelsea. Good afternoon to you at home and to the team in the studio with me, Kwaku Afari, Dan Khan and Dave Reed. I mean, we have to start, Kwaku, with you. We did say we're not talking about Chelsea in this show. Well, we are now because Kepa Arrizabalaga off to Bournemouth on loan. I mean, that's just one of Chelsea's goalkeepers off the books. They've only got 8 now.
I know. Finally, Chelsea seem to be moving past Kepa. Joined the club in 2018 under Maurizio Sarri. And people forget, his first season was actually pretty decent at the club, but it was shrouded by the fact that we had that infamous moment in the League Cup final where he refused to come off the pitch, and his Chelsea career never recovered from that point. He's a keeper that was signed for a lot of money, the most expensive keeper in the history of football. Chelsea were linked with Alisson before they brought in Kepa. How different Chelsea's fortunes might have been if they secured his services after he left Roma. And he's a keeper who struggled to find a home. Of course, last season he went on loan to Real Madrid in light of Courtois' ACL injury. But eventually lost his place in the starting lineup to Lunin, who performed very well for Real Madrid, especially in the Champions League. And so for Kepa, it's a case of trying to find a new home. Obviously very familiar with the English game, very familiar with Andoni Iraola, having played with him. And so this is an opportunity for him to go and establish himself, because I still think there's a good keeper there. Obviously, he's not necessarily the most comfortable with the ball at his feet, and he will be asked to do a lot of that under Iraola. But Bournemouth are a team that don't have as much expectation as a Chelsea or a Real Madrid. And so for Kepa, this might be the right move at the right time. But it's interesting to see there's no obligation or option to buy, because we've seen all the loans recently have had that stipulation included in the contract, and he's extended his Chelsea contract as well, which is par for the course in terms of what Chelsea are doing in this transfer window. But for Kepa, I'm happy that he's making this move, and it just shifts, like you said, one of the keepers that Chelsea have got in the books, because there's about 7 or 8 there. Yeah, Chelsea actually did sign a goalkeeper today from Genk, and he's gone back on loan, so that's another goalkeeper. But Dave, why do you think there is no option or obligation to buy? Do you think it was just a case that that was the only way it could get done?
Possibly, but I think if Chelsea believe internally that they do have one of the best goalkeepers in Europe, which is what they thought they signed, then they might believe that a loan to Bournemouth, regular football, will raise his value and raise his stock in order to either go for a sale next season, next summer, or indeed fight for his place in the Chelsea lineup. So I think from Bournemouth's perspective, and I think from Andoni Iraola's perspective, he's got an interesting dynamic on his hands. Obviously, they've been looking at signing a new goalkeeper. They were looking at Mamardashvili and doing a deal with Liverpool on that front, but that didn't progress, and that goalkeeper looks like he's going to be staying in Spain this season. But Neto is the captain at Bournemouth, so there's going to have to be a change of armband unless there's an understanding that Kepa isn't automatically walking into the first team, and he's going to be there to fight for his place. But you would expect there would be some minute stipulation within that loan deal as well. And usually what happens is you either have to play a player for a certain number of minutes, and if you don't, there's some sort of financial kickback for the parent club. So, yeah, Kepa going to Bournemouth, you would expect him to be their first-team goalkeeper this year.
I think that's the interesting part, is the Neto part of it, because he is the captain, and to have Kepa coming in, I mean, as you mentioned, you'd think there was some sort of conversation with Neto that, look, you're going to now have to challenge for the jersey and see whether it's going to be yourself or Kepa who's going to come in to challenge for it.
I mean, obviously, Quaker, you alluded to it there. He became the world's most expensive goalkeeper when Chelsea signed him back in 2018, £72 million. Quaker, what are you laughing at?
It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money.
It is a lot of money. But Chelsea, have they just sort of come to the conclusion that they're probably now just not going to get anywhere near what they paid for him back then?
I think Chelsea came to the conclusion that he wasn't the first choice goalkeeper. He wouldn't be a long-term goalkeeper after they brought in Edouard Mendy. If you remember him, he's now playing football in Saudi Arabia. But kept football in Saudi Arabia. There was a lot of upside when he left Bilbao, but it just didn't work out. And obviously the media pressure piled on him after that incident with Sarri. Under Lampard in the following season, he lost his place to Edouard Mendy. And so it's a case of Chelsea never going to recoup £72 million for a keeper that's been out of form and out of favour for the last two clubs he's played for. But, like Dave alluded to, if he can go and find a home at Bournemouth and maybe rediscover his form, there might be a future for him at the top level. I don't necessarily think it's at Chelsea. But you mentioned Neto. He was dropped for 4 of the final 5 league games last season at Bournemouth, despite being captain. He had some shaky performances. And so Kepa will look at that opportunity as a chance to start for a Premier League club that people see are on the up and up. And I think it's a great place for him to go, especially playing under a manager that he knows so well.
Yes, just to recap that breaking news, Kepa Arrizabalaga having a medical at Bournemouth today ahead of a loan move. Well, now to some breaking news that we brought you earlier on in the day, and that's Manchester United have a full agreement with PSG for the signing of midfielder Manuel Ugarte. United will pay an initial fee of £42.2 million, but the deal could be worth as much as £50.7 million, including performance-related add-ons. As I said, he will fly to the UK for a medical today. I mean, Dave, it's been a while. We've always known that Manchester United had their interest in Manuel Ugarte, but they will be happy that 3 days before the window they finally got their man.
Yeah, I think there was a bit of surprise in some quarters that Manchester United started this season without signing a midfielder, given the issues that they had in midfield last season. I think it's a deal that probably pleases both sides. PSG have recouped a good fee for a player that probably wouldn't have played too many minutes this season, given the players that they have strengthened their midfield with. And I think from United's perspective, they're paying a fee that they believe is probably a little bit less than what PSG initially wanted. And the closer this got towards deadline day, we were even talking about a loan deal, which really wasn't what PSG were after. They were after a permanent sale. So United get a player they want and fills a gap that they need filling. PSG sell a player for a good price that wouldn't have got too many minutes this season. And I think from United's perspective, they're buying a player for a price that they believe is a fair fee. I think it's delayed slightly because of his involvement in the Copa America. He was named in their team of the tournament, so that tends to delay deals until we get towards end of July, start of August.
Well, Dan, why Manuel Ugarte? A lot of midfielders on the market, but why have Manchester United identified him as their man?
Well, that is the question. But first of all, I just want to pay my respects, because with Scott McTominay looking closer to joining Napoli in Serie A, we need to pay our respects to the McFred era at Manchester United. You know, Fred leaving to Fenerbahce just last season, joining Jose Mourinho, and now McTominay looks like he's on his way out as well. But let's look at his potential replacement in Manuel Ugarte. And when you look at his Liga stats from last season, I mean, he is this number 6 that Manchester United have been looking for. You look at the tackles, interceptions. I think one thing that really stands out is his possession won in the middle third, because what Erik ten Hag wants to do at United with a new pressing style, he wants to get his players further up the pitch. But if the oppositions do be that first line of the press, they need to win it in midfield. And that's perhaps where they're being beat a little bit at the in the moment with Kobbie Mainoo and Casemiro in midfield. But Ugarte looks like that number 6 that could play next to Casemiro or potentially instead of him. And his pass accuracy is very good as well. But when you look at what Manchester United have done in this window so far, what you see across this board is reinforcements in the spine of the team. You start with Joshua Zirkzee, signed from Bologna. He'll be playing with Rasmus Højlund, of course, when he's back fit. Lenny Yoro, just 18 years old. He'll be back fit soon enough, but real potential for him. And then you look at Matthias de Ligt. He brings a wealth of experience, a very good age as well. And we could be seeing a new United partnership with himself and Lisandro Martinez, potentially. And then Noussat Mazraoui can play both fullback positions, which is what United have needed with Luke Shaw and Terrell Malacia's injuries over the last season or so. And then Ugarte, he could be the missing link for Manchester United in terms of their reinforcements. It's also worth noting, these are all the incomings, but what about the outgoings for Manchester United this summer? Well, when you look at this graphic, this is one of their best windows in terms of sales. Already notable sales in terms of Mason Greenwood, Aaron Wan-Bissaka, a few others as well, Facundo Pellistri. Notably, a lot of these players as well have really big sell-on clauses as well. So it looks like United, in their new structure, have done some really good business coming in, but also out.
Yeah, and one of those, like Dan said, you know, that McFred era is over. It looks like Scott McTominay is heading to Napoli. Again, it does feel like United have been trying to maybe get this sale over the line. Now that they've got Ugarte, they can now sell McTominay. Do you think this is the right move at the right time for the player?
Well, I think just going back to what you were talking about there, I think in 21-22, that was the most minutes that he's played in a Premier League season. He was in United's most used 11 alongside Fred in that United midfield. I think 2 years have passed since then, and his role has reduced somewhat, I would say, over the last 2 years, and it's mostly been from the bench. But I think you have to give McTominay credit. You know, he's played under permanent managers, caretaker managers, interim managers, and he's contributed to all of those teams and has been rated by all of those managers. And in that 21-22 season, when he played his most minutes, he was competing with Nemanja Matic, who's gone, Paul Pogba, who's gone, Fred, who has gone. So there's definitely been an evolution in the United midfield. So, yeah, I think from Scott McTominay's point of view, you know, United were talking to West Ham last season about selling him. They were talking to Fulham about selling him last summer. They were talking to Fulham this summer about selling him. It feels like he wasn't going to be part of United's long-term plan. And now it looks like he's going to be going to Serie A and Italy. So it's muck sauce to muck arrabbiata.
Excellent.
Yeah?
Did you just say excellent?
No, I said I wasn't going to do that.
I was trying to think of some.
I said I wasn't going to do it, but I've done it.
Could you not have thought of anything better other than arrabbiata?
Yeah, no, I can't.
No.
McCarbonara.
Neapolitan?
Muck carbonara, that's better.
Maybe.
The
I think we need to stop this.
carbonara. Shall we? Yeah.
Leave that there, yeah.
Yeah? Shall we stop? OK. I think we will stop. Right, that's a potential outgoing then at Manchester United. Scott McTominay going to Napoli. Will there be an outgoing at Brentford? Well, they have rejected a £15 million bid from Nottingham Forest for Joao Cancelo. I mean, Kwaku, surely Brentford, I mean, they've rejected the deal, we're assuming they don't want to lose him, but they definitely won't, will they?
It's a move that doesn't make sense for either parties, in my opinion. If you look at the Forest side of things, initially, Chris Wood has obviously scored a lot of goals last season. Taiwo, 1 year before his injury last season, was scoring a lot of goals. They've still got Emmanuel Dennis there. And look at the additions they brought in this summer in the form of Ramon Sosa and Jota Silva, who both can play on the left. Those positions that Visa can play in as well. And so, bear in mind, Callum Hudson-Odoi is also there, who had a good season last year. And so when you look at it from Brentford's point of view, he's a player that scored a fair few goals for them last season. He can play as a centre-forward. He can play as a left winger. Predominantly last season, he played through the middle because of Ivan Toney's absence. And he had his best goal-scoring season in a Brentford shirt, scored 12 league goals in 34 games. And bear in mind, he did also go to AFCON for a month, where he was one of Congo's best players, scored 2 goals, helped them get to the semi-finals in the team of the tournament. So had a career year last season, still got 2 years left on his contract. And so for Brentford, especially with Igor Thiago being down with an injury and Ivan Toney's future up in the air, it wouldn't make sense for them to let go of one of their most effective players this summer. But we've seen crazy things happen in this transfer window, and it seems that Forest are intent on bringing in an attacker. We saw the links with Eddie Nketiah. So we've got to watch this one carefully. But from my point of view, I just don't understand why either Forest will try and make the sign or Brentford will let him go.
Dave, there is obviously, Kwaku mentioned it there is still so much uncertainty about Ivan Toney's future as well.
Yeah, I mean, this one feels like it could go to deadline day itself. I think, you know, there's interest in him from Saudi Arabia. There's been an offer already, which has fallen short of Brentford's valuation. So I think from Ivan Toney's point of view, the lack of interest or offers from Premier League sides maybe was unexpected this summer. given the amount of interest that's been in him in the past. But I think from other Premier League clubs' point of view, they're probably looking at Brentford's valuation and feel like that's a little bit prohibitive for them. So options are looking limited as we get towards the deadline for Ivan Toney. But I suspect something will happen over the next couple of days, and there will be a resolution next couple of days. I wouldn't rule out another move to a Premier League side if Brentford deadline, but it seems like Saudi Arabia is the option on the table at the moment.
Yeah, we will keep you up to date on any developments regarding Toney and Vissa. Right, still to come, we'll hear from Russell Martin on Southampton's hopes of signing a striker. Plus, we'll have news from Newcastle. Welcome back to Transfer Talk. Right, it's time to hear from Southampton manager Russell Martin.
Just going back to the weekend, you said after the Forest game that we don't possess the individual quality up top like Forest do. So with the transfer window still being open, is that perhaps an area of the pitch that you might look to do something about between now?
I think, we're looking at a few things, but also it's not like a slight on our players or our club. They're Forest in a bit of a different place than us. So that if you look at what they've spent on the likes of Elanga and Hudson-Odoi and Morgan Gibbs-White, is a lot of money. And then Elliot Anderson as well playing in midfield and the guys on their bench. So we're just in different places. It's up to us to stay in the league long enough that we can then be in a place where we can go and do the same thing. So we have to do it differently. But yeah, they possess some top talent, and we will still be trying to add in our way for sure, because we need players that can make a difference. So yeah, I think it's a position we'd like to add if we can at some point in the next few days.
Reports this morning, I don't know if you've seen, could suggest that James Ward-Prowse would be allowed to leave West Ham. Obviously, a player with plenty of history here, a club favourite. Is he someone that could do a job for you in that role?
Prowse is probably one of many players in the Premier League could do a job for us. But does that mean he's going to come and do a job for us? We have a lot of midfield players, so I don't think it's a position that we are really trying to recruit in. So I don't know. I've stayed in touch with Prowse on and off over the last year, just stayed in touch, and he obviously got in touch when we got promoted. The club means a lot to him. But I don't know his situation, I haven't been updated on that. So he's West Ham's player, and he's a very, very good player. We were so impressed with him in the short time we had working with him. So yeah, I don't know where that's come from. It's not been on my radar. So yeah, I don't know what or where that comes from. The window brings up many things, and if his situation at West Ham has changed now, then I'm sure there'll be a lot of people that will be interested in his services.
Another name is the final keeper, Justin Balow. Have you got any update or anything to add on him?
We've been linked with a lot of goalkeepers. Justin is one of them, as I said the other day, that has been on a long list that we've watched and we quite liked. But I don't have any update for you at all on that situation right now. I think it's a position we will add to, because we only have two experienced ones at the moment in Joe Lumley and Alex McCarthy, so we need another one. But who that is, I couldn't tell you right now, because things change very quickly.
We're going to hear from another manager now, because Newcastle remain in talks with Crystal Palace over a deal for Mark Gay. The clubs are expected to try and reach an agreement that will suit all parties before Friday's deadline. Eddie Howe remained light-tipped in his news conference this morning.
In terms of incomings, no, that work's still going on behind the scenes. A few days left. I think everyone's trying their best to improve the squad, and yeah, we'll wait and see what happens with the next few days.
The Mark Gay story doesn't seem to go away. Are you still hopeful, or have you given up on Mark?
I'm not going to comment on individual players.
And Kieran, where are you with Kieran?
I think when you look at his performance on Sunday, that was a performance of someone that was focused and ready to help the team. I thought he did, in every aspect. I thought all the substitutes did, enhanced our performance. But it's Kieran's experience and his know-how on the pitch seemed to have a galvanising effect on the group, so I was very pleased with his impact.
More talks with him this week then?
No, only football talk. There'd be no need for any other talk. I think he's in a good place.
By that, I meant Eddie Howe remained tight-lipped in his news conference this morning, not light-tipped. Just to confirm, tight-lipped in his news conference this morning. Dave, just first of all, what did you make... Sorry, I need to compose myself. What did you make of what Eddie Howe had to say in his news conference?
Yeah, so...
Say in his news...
Sound too enthusiastic, did he? But then again, you know, the tone of Eddie Howe's news conferences recently, and I suppose over the last year, is not too forthcoming when it comes to transfers. But what he does do is he makes it clear who he wants to keep. And it was pretty clear there that he wants to keep Kieran Trippier, despite media outlets like Sky Sports and The Athletic talking about him leaving and clubs that are potentially interested in him. Also in that news conference today, he talked about Elliot Anderson, again, not for the first time, talking about his disappointment that he was sold, mainly down to PSR issues. And in terms of incomings this week, we're talking about Mark Gay quite a lot, but it didn't sound too positive that Newcastle will be bringing players in this week. You look at the summer signings there. I mean, Lewis Hall was obviously a one that was done last year and then confirmed this summer. Asula, certainly maybe not expected to have a huge impact on the first team this season, but is a player that probably has a lot of ingredients to be a top striker, but it will take him time to get to that level. Particularly, Lloyd Kelly has helped things at the back, and then 2 goalkeepers, and they're supposedly talking about signing another goalkeeper as well. But so I think it's a really significant week for Newcastle this week. I think there's been a bit of external pressure on them from Alan Shearer in terms of getting signings over the line, and not just any signings. It's just a statement signing this week. So it'd be interesting to see how that develops. Newcastle obviously want to do deals. Whether they can get them done is another question.
Kwaku, Dave mentioned it there about, him being very vocal about Kieran Trippier, him wanting him to stay, and also they sold Elliot Anderson. How difficult of a situation is that for Eddie Howe when you actively come out and say you want these players to stay, but the club are looking to sell them?
It's a very difficult situation, and we saw the list of players brought in this summer. Like you mentioned, Lewis Hall was already done. Asula's not expected to play, and Lloyd Kelly's brought in to mitigate the loss of Botman, who's out until the end of the year. And Jamal Lascelles is out to the end of the year as well. And so when you look at this Newcastle side, especially from a fan's point of view, and Eddie Howe has to kind of sort that situation out in terms of making it realistic for fans in terms of what Newcastle are going to do this season, it's a difficult situation because ostensibly Newcastle should be the richest club in the world, right? In terms of the new ownership group and in terms of the money they should have at their disposal. Obviously, PSR has restricted that, and it's a very difficult situation that he's in. They want to be on the front foot, but it's been more of a defensive strategy in this transfer window. And you can hear from his news conferences that he's frustrated by the lack of activity when it comes to transfers, especially when it comes to incomings at Newcastle. They had a poor season by their standards last year. They took a step back. They want to take a step forward this season. They had a decent start to the season in terms of league performances and results, but they need to get some business done in the transfer window if they want to push on to that next step.
Yeah, absolutely right. Still to come on Transfer Talk, will Liverpool be bringing in a winger? Welcome back. Scotland head coach Steve Clarke is speaking to the media after announcing his squad for next month's Nations League doubleheader with Portugal and Poland.
Afternoon, Steve. Good to see you. Can you talk us through some of the decisions you've had to make with this squad? A few challenges to deal with, but I guess that also throws up a few opportunities along the way.
Yeah, I think so. I think I touched on it before the championships in the summer, that maybe we'd freshen a little bit going into this campaign, just to have a look at one or two different players, try and give ourselves a deeper pool of talent, and that's the way it is. Obviously got some players still not with clubs. Liam Cooper and Stuart Armstrong spring to mind. We hope they'll get fixed up sometime this week. Still lots of injuries to deal with, which is an issue, but also an opportunity for other people.
I think Ryan Gould's name sort of catches people's eye because he's been spoken about for so long. He's always been the one player that supporters have kind of spoken in fond tones about, and successive managers haven't turned to him. Why have you included him this time round?
He was in my thoughts before the tournament. He's obviously chosen a different path in his career. Left Scotland as a very young man. On a roundabout journey, ended up in Vancouver, where he's been one of the best players, one of the most valuable players. He's a creative player. He's slightly different to the type of player that we've got. And it'll be nice to have a look at him up close and personal.
John Souttar is back, ever present for Rangers so far this season. How impressed have you been with the way he's responded to the disappointment of missing out on the Euros?
Certainly not surprised, because I know John as a character, strong personality, obviously came back from really significant injuries. It's great to see him playing regularly with Rangers and playing as well as he's playing, so yeah, he deserves his place in the squad.
You mentioned about freshening it up. Was it important to keep some of the boys who got added to the group for the summer involved, and also to give Ben Doak another chance to show you what he could do, given he was unfortunately unable to go to Germany? Yeah,
I think so. I think when you bring someone into the camp, it's important that you show a little bit of faith in them over a period of time, and then you can assess them better. You have more time to work with them, and hopefully they all start to get minutes on the pitch and show what they can do for their country.
It's the first time we've had a chance to speak to you with a bit of distance between the tournament and yourself. What are your reflections on it? What lessons have you learnt?
It's the same as everyone else. Everyone's disappointed that we didn't achieve what we wanted to achieve in the tournament. I think the biggest thing is you have to learn in football to move on. It's most important. The last time we had a disappointment that would be on this level would have been when we failed to get to the World Cup. We went away, we reset, we came back, and we managed to qualify for the Nations League A section. So we responded well. The last qualifying campaign for the Euro 24 was probably one of our best, and that's what we have to do again.
I think having had such a last one, which in terms of the qualification campaign was so impressive, and you then couldn't replicate maybe some of that form and energy and intensity in the tournament. How do you do that?
In terms of
replicating how well you played in qualifying in the tournament proper, because that's maybe where the criticism comes, I guess.
There's always going to be criticism when you don't achieve your targets, so if all the criticism comes to me, that's fine. I can take it. I think you have to look at the build-up to the tournament. Wasn't smooth. We lost a lot of players injured. Even from in camp, we lost a lot of players. And I think what we've shown is that if we're missing one or two key players, then we're not as strong a side as we would be with those players in the team.
It obviously affords the chance, Steve, to reflect.
We've got some breaking news to bring you. Leeds United have had a bid rejected for Sheffield United midfielder Gus Harmer. We understand Leeds are unlikely to increase their offer, but they are still looking to strengthen before Friday's deadline. Spurs winger Manuel Solomon is expected to complete a loan move to Elland Road. And Leeds are also interested in Bournemouth defender Max Aarons, although no offer has been tabled just yet. Birmingham City are closing in on the signing of QPR striker Lyndon Dykes. It's understood the Scotland international is due to undergo a medical with the League One club after a fee of around £1.5 million was agreed. And Middlesbrough are set to sign Neto Borges. The 27-year-old left-back has completed a medical. Borough have agreed a £1.3 million deal to sign him from Clermont Foot 63 in France. Right, let's get to Liverpool, who are still yet to sign a single player in this window. However, they have made inquiries about Federico Chiesa, but are yet to actively pursue a deal for the Juventus winger. So, Dave, where do we stand on this? Are Liverpool finally going to get a signing over the line?
I think that's a little bit premature for the moment because it's initially they've just asked about the conditions of a potential deal, how that might work financially between the clubs. And Chiesa isn't the only player that Liverpool are looking at either. They're looking at other players in that forward positions too. So I think from Liverpool's point of view, if they've shown previously that if they identify a player and they can do a deal, then they will strike. I think if it's at the right price in particular, under the right terms, they will do it. Liverpool aren't the only club looking at Chiesa as well. Barcelona are also interested in him, but I mean, who knows really what's going on there? I'm not even sure the accountant knows what's going on at Barcelona. Chiesa was left out of Juve's pre-season tour. He's only got a year left on his contract, which might mean there's a bit of wriggle room on the price there. But certainly very, very early stages for that, and by no means does an inquiry or even just finding out exactly what a deal would look like mean that that's going to continue forward into anything more formal.
I mean, Liverpool have quite a lot of options in attack, Quaku. So where does Federico Chiesa fit?
That's a very, very good question. It adds depth to a position of strength for Liverpool. Obviously got Luis Diaz, Mo Salah, Cody Gakpo, Diogo Jota, Darwin Núñez, who can all play in those positions. Ben Doak, who's named in Steve Clarke's Scotland squad, is a young player that is coming through and they had big hopes for at Anfield. And so it's not a case of Chiesa's coming in to definitely start for Liverpool, but if he can recapture some of the form that saw him light up Euro 2020, then he's going to be a good player in the Premier League. He's got the physicality. Of course, he's a player that suffered with that ACL injury in the 21-22 seasons, and he struggled since then as someone... I'm not comparing myself to Chiesa, but I've had an ACL injury myself, and I know that niggling injuries can follow that. Why are you laughing?
You're just comparing yourself to Juventus and Italy's Federico Chiesa.
If the shoe fits. But he's a player that I really like in terms of what he brings to any side he plays for. Watched him up close and personal at the Euros, and he wasn't the same player that we saw 3 or 4 years ago. Was actually dropped for Italy's final group game against Croatia, which was a crucial game, which kind of tells you where he is at in terms of the standing amongst managers that he's played for. So for him, it makes sense to come to the Premier League where his attributes could be utilised, but it's about finding consistent rhythm in football because he hasn't had that for the last couple of years because of injuries.
Dan, obviously, there is a reason why Liverpool have inquired to Juventus about Chiesa. Like, sort of, Quaku alluded to it there. What's he been like over the last couple of years?
Yeah, well, it's been a really difficult few years, as Quaku mentioned. That ACL injury in 2021 really set him back, I think. And since then, he has struggled in previous years with a few niggling injuries, whether that's been knee injuries, hamstring injuries, or just other muscular issues as well. I mean, you can see there just how many days he's missed since the 2021-22 season. That's also a lot of games missed as well, being 80. But I think last year, you know, we mentioned where he could fit in at Liverpool. It's quite interesting when you look at Juventus last season because he actually played as a second striker for the majority of the season behind Vlahovic. So where he fits in at Liverpool, I mean, the positives are where you look at, especially last season when we see his recent seasons, is he's extremely two-footed. He can play across the front three positions and he can chip in with assists as well. I think we all have to remember now with the football calendar, there are so many games on there. And I think a team like Liverpool, the way Arne Slot will want to play, you know, rotating those front four, front five players will be really important. So if that means you can take off Mo Salah or Cody Gakpo, Luis Diaz with someone like Chiesa, and just freshen up those legs in terms of pressing for the last 20, 30 minutes of a game, you can definitely see the value. And as you mentioned, Dave, with perhaps a bit of negotiation around the price with the year left on his contract, is it a risk worth taking? I mean, if they end up doing so, it seems like the price would fit and, you know, why not?
I think Dan's right. You know, the injuries have obviously not helped his development, but also I think Juventus have kind of found it difficult almost to fit him in, despite the amazing amount of money that they paid for him. Juve have tended to play either a three at the back or even before that a kind of diamond in midfield, and he struggled a little bit under Allegri, who was kind of trying to shoehorn him in a little bit, and he ended up playing, as you say, as a second striker. I think he even ended up getting whistled by his own fans last season. It's been tough for him to find his home. I think Allegri even utilised him at wing-back, which isn't his strongest position. But I guess from Liverpool's point of view, you can see where they're going with this. I think they were obviously interested in Anthony Gordon and wanted to do a deal there. And what he has in common with Chiesa is, a very direct runner, someone who is a good 1v1 dribbler and can also cross the ball, has got good crossing abilities. So that's what they have in common. I think they're both good counter pressers as well, Anthony Gordon and Chiesa. I think, Chiesa might need a little bit of instruction in terms of how he goes about that from what I've seen of him in Serie A. So that you can obviously see where Liverpool are going with this. Different price point, obviously, to Anthony Gordon, different age, but a kind of similar thinking in terms of Gordon and Chiesa.
Yes, that's one player potentially coming to England. To one player now that looks like he will be leaving because Al Hilal have agreed a deal with Manchester City to sign Joao Cancelo. The fee is £21.2 million. Meanwhile, Manchester City are also aware of interest from Atletico Madrid in Mateus Nunes, but there has been no contact from the club yet. Atletico are understood to be seeking a loan deal. I mean, Kwaku, this is someone with arguably one of the most incredible CVs ever.
Yeah, we waxed lyrical about him this morning on Good Morning Transfers. And yeah, has had an amazing career up to this point. Of course, remember that 2 or 3 year spell at City where he was one of the best fullbacks in the country, if not the world, in a couple of the PFA Team of the Seasons, and seemed like he was almost irreplaceable for Man City. But Pep Guardiola always finds a way of replacing his players if they do want to leave, and he's gone in a different direction in terms of maybe more robust fullbacks as opposed to inverting fullbacks. But Cancelo is a player that I loved watching when he was in his pomp for Man City. Went to Barcelona, or he went to Bayern Munich on loan, a year-long loan to Barcelona last season. And if Barca are in a stronger financial position, you could see him maybe signing there permanently because he hasn't dropped off in terms of his form. He's only 30 years old. But now it's a new dawn. Saudi Arabia looks like it's on the horizon for him. But he won't look back in anger at his time at City because he's had...
Hey? Hey?
I'm sorry.
Go on.
It's cheap, that one there. But yeah, he's had a great career and he's won everything. Like I say, one of the most glittering CVs in football. And he's now got a new challenge at Saudi Arabia. He's going to be paid a lot of money. Why are you looking at me like that?
I actually thoroughly enjoyed that. I did. I thought that was good. Right, coming up. Dan definitely didn't. Coming up, we'll be taking a look at the players who could be on the move before Friday's deadline. Guehi, Tony, Sancho and more. Welcome back. Ipswich have already brought in 11 players this window, but they're still looking for a centre forward. Their move for Armando Broja stalled over the weekend due to an issue with his medical. It is understood going back in for Broja has not been completely ruled out. Kieran McKenna gave us an update on this morning.
With Armando, it's of course a player that we've spoken to. I think that's pretty well known. There's discussions going on with Chelsea at the moment, so I've not been privy to them over the last 24 hours. So there's discussions ongoing, and we'll see if it's the right thing for the clubs and for the player before Friday. And other than that, look, it's not right to speak on any other rumours really until anything's confirmed.
And with Armando, sorry, just quickly, was there an issue flagged in the medical?
Again, I think that's that's not right for me to comment on. That's between the player first and foremost and the clubs, and there's discussions ongoing, and we'll see what the resolution is by Friday.
But optimistic that might get done?
Optimistic for Wednesday night, to be honest. It's a fine balance as a manager. You want to, of course, you have a part to play in the recruitment and a big part to play in it, but the focus for me is on the next training session coming up in an hour or two, and then getting ready for Wednesday night. And the club's going to work really hard to be as strong as we can by Friday night.
3 days to go until the deadline, and we've picked out a few players who could be on the move before Friday night. Let's start with Mark Gay at Crystal Palace. Talks continue between Palace and Newcastle to reach a compromise over a deal for the England defender. Newcastle's latest offer of 60 plus 5 wasn't accepted, as dialogue remains ongoing. Ivan Toney at Brentford next. He's fit, but not in the team. Talks continue over a move to Al Ahly in Saudi Arabia. Their first offer was short of Brentford's valuation, and we're told they will stick to it as the clock ticks down. Chelsea are willing to listen to offers for Raheem Sterling and Ben Chilwell. They could be 2 of 7 players leaving the club. Manchester United want to sell Jadon Sancho permanently, but Juventus only want a loan. Chelsea also interested in the player. Chelsea also interested in this man as well, Victor Osimhen from Napoli, but the striker's valuation and wages are an issue. Al Ahly in Saudi Arabia have made a big offer for him. And finally, Aaron Ramsdale, firmly Arsenal's number 2. Ajax asked about him earlier in the window for a loan deal. Arsenal would like an obligation at least. Southampton and Wolves have been interested during this window. So those are some of the players who could be on the move before the Friday night deadline. Who do we think is going to be the most likely to leave?
It's a difficult one because a lot of those players they haven't got homes anymore in terms of the situations at clubs. So I want to talk about Victor Osimhen because his agent's been very vocal and made teams acutely aware of what he wants to do going forward. Came out and said, this is his agent, said Osimhen's a Napoli player with a contract recently renewed with mutual satisfaction. He made history, and when there were major offers, we always accepted the club's decisions. And so that's basically putting not the blame at Napoli's door, but putting the onus on them, because he obviously did them a favour by signing a new contract on a bumper deal, by the way, made him their highest paid player, one of the highest paid players in Serie A. But right now, the situation doesn't work for either party. They want to get his wages off the books. He wants to go and play football elsewhere at a European powerhouse. It's just that there's not too many landing spots for a player that costs this much money and a player that's being paid this much as well. Obviously, what he's done at Napoli will live forever, and he will always...
Oh, come on.
What happened? And he'll always be remembered in that part of Italy. But it's time for him to move on and find a new home. And Chelsea, of course, linked with him. He's linked with moves to PSG. That apparently is not happening. So it remains to be seen what happens with Victor Osimhen. But I just can't see him being at Napoli come the end of the window.
Yeah, that's Victor Osimhen. I mean, there's obviously a few players we're talking about in and out of Chelsea. But, Dan, there could be a potential swap deal somewhere because Raheem Sterling's reportedly interested in joining United, and Sancho's been talked about the other way.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like the initial talks Chelsea and Manchester United have had around Jadon Sancho. There's some suggestion that a player from Chelsea's side could go the other way. It's really interesting because I think Jadon Sancho, let's start with him. I mean, we were talking earlier that he did an interview a few years ago saying that he was a Chelsea fan growing up. He idolised Frank Lampard and Didier Drogba as well. So, he is also from London, so perhaps it does make a lot of sense. But then I think, I saw Chelsea play Wolves on Sunday, and you look at all the options they have. By the end of the game, Felix, Neto, Madueke, Palmer was a really interesting kind of 4-man attack. So, we'll see on that. But Raheem Sterling, I mean, I don't think there's been ever a player to play for Liverpool, Manchester City, Chelsea and Manchester United. So that would be interesting. But again, Manchester United, we've talked a lot on these shows about they have a lot of options out wide. So for me at the moment, it's really difficult, where does Raheem Sterling go, especially on the wages he's on and the contract he's on. There's going to have to be a lot of willingness from Chelsea and Sterling to really work this out for him.
I mean, only 3 days to go now for Raheem Sterling to find a new club. What about Chilwell, another player that has been linked with Manchester United, but we know the injury issues Luke Shaw's had at left-back, so surely bringing in another left-back that's had similar injury issues isn't the right way to go.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's missed 100 games in the last 3-4 years at Chelsea. So as you mentioned, for Manchester United, perhaps it wouldn't make sense. I mean, for me, I still think Ben Chilwell's a great left-back and he just needs consistency and to be fit. Personally, I would love to see maybe a potential reunion at Leicester because Leicester, I think, need reinforcements in that area, whether that could be a loan or whatever. But Chilwell, I think, definitely needs a move and he definitely needs to play football.
Dave, what about Gay then? I was thinking maybe it's just a matter of time because Newcastle know what Palace want for him, but Eddie Howe didn't seem too confident. He obviously refused to be drawn into talking about players that don't play for his club, but can you see this one happening?
I think when we were on the shows last week, I think there was a bit more optimism coming from the Newcastle side that the offer that they had made last week wasn't accepted, but it wasn't a flat no either, and that Crystal Palace were open to talking to Newcastle about potentially reaching a resolution. And then I think as the days have gone on, perhaps that bit of optimism has faded somewhat. And we heard from Eddie Howe today saying that he wasn't sure whether they were going to get a centre-back and a right winger in by Friday. It doesn't mean they might not get one of those, but it could be one or the other. So you feel like there's still a little bit of a way to go for Gay's future to be sorted one way or the other.
What about Ramsdale, Dan? Wolves linked, but look, Southampton and Bournemouth were two other clubs that were as well, but it looks like they might be going in other directions. Why do Wolves want him?
It does look like that at the moment. I think, again, being at the Wolves-Chelsea game on the weekend, of course, there were a lot of deficiencies and it was uncharacteristic by Gary O'Neill's side in terms of their defending. But I do think you kind of saw a few limitations for Jose Sarr with his distribution and the way Wolves want to play with their centre-backs. They were really good at points, playing out from the back with Totti and Mosquera. But I do think Jose Sarr's distribution could be better. And I think Aaron Ramsdale would represent that. So we'll see what happens in the next few days. But I think, if they could make that move happen financially as well, it'd be really positive, I think, for Wolves.
Yeah, well, we will wait and see what happens there. Right, we have two breaking news stories to bring you. Sheffield United have agreed a fee of around £2.5 million for Celtic winger Mikey Johnston. It's anticipated this agreement could smooth things over in Celtic's pursuit of Blade centre-back Austin Trusty. Elsewhere, Justin Bilo is having a medical with Southampton today. The goalkeeper is getting closer to joining them from Feyenoord. Thank you, Kwaku. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Dave. It's been a pleasure. Coming up, it's Lunchtime Live. We'll be speaking to former Arsenal and England striker Alan Smith. That's coming after the break.